A lot of talk about MDMA being legalized. Will we see MDMA legalized in Q1 of 2024? If so, what does that do for the psychedelic and mental health industry from a business standpoint? Hey everyone, welcome to the Traded Black Podcast. I am your host, Shad Dales. Thanks for checking in. As usual, subscribe to our channel, share this video to your network, click on that bell for notifications and leave a comment because today it's year end. We're talking psychedelics, and one of the leaders in the space, we bring in once again the CEO of Numinus Wellness, which trades at the TSX under the ticker symbol NUMI, Payton Nyquvest, back to the show. How are you, sir? Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. I'm doing well. How about you?
Yeah, not bad. Decided to take 5 or 10 minutes off and right back to work.
I hear you.
Busy. It's busy. A lot of people asking us questions, so let's get right to it. You know, we've had a lot of discussions with investors both on Reddit and Twitter that want to know about the strategy plan going into 2023. I think a lot of people obviously like the company. They want the company to succeed. However, there are some concerns right now, so let's address a lot of those concerns. So first off, let's look at the last 12 months real quick and recap. What would you say is the biggest advancement your company has made in the last 12 months? What comes to mind?
Yeah, I think the easy one is obviously the Novamind acquisition. And, you know, we'll get into it probably a little bit more, but one, just for what Novamind had created was transformational for us. But what we've been able to do with that acquisition in a very short period of time, which people are going to see going into early next year, really, I think puts us in a category of our own, and is no question the thing over the last 12 months that's been the most impactful for the company.
Okay. All right. So let's start. I want to go over some of the questions that investors reached out to us on both Twitter and Shroom Stocks on Reddit. And we want to make sure that we're listening to a lot of our viewers, a lot of our followers, and some of the questions they have. So first question that we received, first off, we want to discuss your existing partnership with MAPS, which is to conduct data collection for the ongoing studies for MAPS MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD in your Numinus clinics. So this is a notable partnership that we've discussed in the past. So can you explain into detail more the benefits of working with MAPS and the partnership it brings to Numinus?
Sure. And I'll preface with, we are a public company, so I do have to be a little cautious of obviously what I can and can't say. But 2023 for MAPS is a monster year, and just to speak to things that MAPS has already announced, in the first quarter of next year, they will be reporting their completion of the phase 3 clinical trial that they did, which this will be, call it phase 3B, because they got to finish phase 3A early due to COVID and report some of those numbers.
Okay. The
phase 3B numbers we anticipate to be as good or potentially better than the phase 3A numbers, which everybody knows were exceptional. The other thing that they've said is they expect to be submitting the final submission in Q3 of next year, which, for people, just so that people are aware, that submission process to the FDA and the DEA for rescheduling is a very programmed process that they go through. So you make that submission, and the FDA and the DEA has about 60 to 90 days to reschedule the drug and then roll it out federally. Through the federal approval process, half of the states in the United States immediately go through that regulatory change. The other half of the states can either choose to or go through their own program. I anticipate pretty much all of the states going forward with it, but even if it's half the states, it's still monumental.
Right. Okay.
You know, they've been carrying out this clinical trial in other countries as well, being Canada, Israel, Europe, Australia. So there should be large changes globally, not just in the US. But talking about our partnership, there's nobody on the service delivery side that has as much experience or familiarity with the MAPS protocol than we do. And I've probably said this until I'm blue in the face, but the big bottleneck for MAPS is going to be trained therapists. And people probably saw we've just submitted an experiential training trial for psilocybin. You could see, potentially more of those submissions come in the new year. But as we've continued to work very, very closely with MAPS, whether that's through the MAPS USX study, continuing to train practitioners, but also helping MAPS with this challenge of how are you going to commercialize MDMA? MAPS business model is going to be selling MDMA, the drug, right?
Okay.
If you think about the MAPS protocol, which MAPS has talked about, it's about a $10,000 to $15,000 full investment, which they anticipate being fully reimbursable day one, and they've done a huge amount of work to make sure that that's the case. That being said, if you think about the revenue or the dollars attached to the therapy and the drug, the MDMA, the drug itself, costs, at most maybe $300 a dose. That leaves a significant amount of revenue on the service provider side. That is a massive opportunity for companies like ours. Now, what
Are you
MAPS
forecasting? Do you have an idea what kind of revenue that will produce?
we have it's not something I want to disclose too much, but if people pull up the MAPS feasibility study that they did, MAPS talks about how much revenue they anticipate to generate just from the sale of MDMA, and it's in the billions of dollars. So people can do the math on if there's billions of dollars of revenue coming in from the sale of a $300 drug product,
right,
and if the whole therapy costs, let's just say $10,000 for sake of argument, that's a huge amount of revenue. Not only revenue, but revenue that is, if you think about the margins on a service like that, our highest margin service is ketamine assisted psychotherapy.
Right.
So, there's good margins attached to it. And again, having it being fully insurance reimbursed day one is a huge opportunity for clients that are in desperate need of the therapy. So without getting into too many details, because MAPS, the mindset of MAPS at the moment is now shifting. They've gone from how do they get through this clinical trial as quickly and as cheaply as possible.
Yeah.
And now the conversation is around how are we going to commercialize this in very short order. So that's some of the answers that we hope to have for MAPS and with this collaboration. So,
and again, timeline wise, as to what people can anticipate or expect as to when a lot of the data you're saying, suggesting it will happen in March.
So the Q3 or the phase 3B submission should be in around March. MAPS anticipates, and again, this is just in what MAPS has disclosed, but they anticipate reporting their first revenue quarter in calendar Q1 of 2024, which means they would have to have sold, some MDMA in order to report that. So that gives people a sense of the timeline. Now, obviously, regulators, all of that stuff, there's some of that may be subject to change, but as it stands currently, as reported by MAPS, that's where we're at.
Okay. Next question I want to bring up. You talked about the highlight of 2022 was the Novamind acquisition. So back in March of 2022, Utah Governor Spencer Cox, he signed a bill to create a task force to study and make recommendations on the therapeutic potential of psychedelic drugs. So saying all this, were you aware of the regulatory changes taking place in Utah prior to the acquisition? And more importantly, how does this affect, I guess, the overall current treatment protocols?
We definitely had an eye on it. Some of the folks who work down at the clinics in Utah were a part of some of those changes and have been very involved with some of the regulatory changes in Utah. So that definitely helped. But for us, the decision was really, really clear in terms of what Novamind had created and Cedar Psychiatry had created. Those were for sure the big reasons for it.
Does this affect at all your current treatment of protocols?
I mean, it's any regulatory changes help. What I can say, there's a huge demand in Utah. People might not think psychedelics and Utah as maybe close compadres, but there's a huge demand in Utah, and I think the Cedar Psychiatry Novamind folks have just done an exceptional job, and we'll get into this more, but from what we've seen from the day of closing the acquisition, we reported this on the earnings call that we did, but revenues continued to climb, profitability has continued to improve, and so that business has just continued to excel even through the integration of the acquisition.
Okay, let's focus now on the core of the feedback that we got related to your latest financial results, which we discussed in our last podcast. Dive a little deeper into those numbers. So first off, We talked about how the headline growth number looked great, as we discussed earlier, due to the consolidation of Novamind. There was significant cash burn to the balance sheet. So, for example, general administrative expenses alone were almost double total revenue. This led to a significant net loss for the quarter and full year. So, can you explain to investors what strategies you have employing to reduce cash burn and get it to a more manageable level heading into 2023? An important question.
Yeah, the number one objective of the company since we closed the Novamind acquisition is profitability, okay, and greatly reducing the burn rate. The burn rate that over that last reported quarter was high due to the Novamind acquisition and just the costs associated with that. People have done the math. We've worked very, very hard to get the burn rate down to $1 million a month. And we're extremely close to that, and hopefully we can continue to improve upon that. But it's been to stretch out the cash as far as humanly possible, yeah, while improving the margins, and you'll see that over the next couple of quarters. That's been the main goal of the company. So with the cash that we've got, we've extended the runway a couple of years at least, and we continue to see that margin number improve. So that's really, what again has been the focus. And the one thing I will say is, after going through the process and a part of some of those costs associated was we really wanted to get an understanding of how can we leverage what we've built, yep, and what is the full potential of what we've built. And as of the closing of the acquisition and where we stand today is we can probably double the output that we're having out of the structure that we've currently got. So there's lots of opportunity for us to improve there, and that's not spend that's not spend $2 to make a dollar. That is improving efficiencies and really leveraging the platform that we've got in the opportunity to, again, get to that profitability as soon as humanly possible while conserving cash as much as humanly possible.
So you're thinking as far as doubling treatments, I would assume it's just further educating and people understanding more and more about the overall medication process. Is that fair?
A little bit. It's also training. It's just leveraging the platform and infrastructure better, getting higher margin services. There was some decline that people noticed in regards to the revenue out of the Canadian clinics over the last couple of quarters. Okay. And that was primarily in an effort to transition some of the services that we were doing out of there to being more focused around ketamine assisted therapy, which is a higher margin service. So there's always a little bit of a transition period as you're moving some of those services. So that's been the focus. And now we've seen those services continue to pick up steam and get more and more traction and more attention. With bringing on Novamind, who is best in class in regards to that model, that's really what we were pivoting as we were going through the Novamind acquisition process. We were focusing on really pivoting the Canadian company to mirror what was going on in Utah based off of what we'd learned through the due diligence process.
Let's talk balance sheet. You said you want to get the burn rate down to $1 million a month. You had approximately $33 million in your balance sheet at the end of fiscal fourth quarter, which is going back to August 31st, 2022. A proactive investors analyst recently estimated that your company may lose $30 million in fiscal 2023. I see a grin on your face. So first off, before we go any further, is that number accurate or a fair assessment? And I think I know where this question's going.
Yeah, next question. But no, it's and I completely get where people are maybe getting that number from.
Where do you think they're getting that number for? Like, what do you mean by that?
Was burn rate high as we were building the company, back when times were good? Yes. And that's why we raised the amount of money that we did. But we didn't raise the money we did and build the thing that we built in order to continue to spend to make the kind of investment that we did to get the company where it is today. So no, we will not be, unless, $200 million of completely non-dilutive funding fell into my lap and there was a reason to spend $30 million based off of where the market is today and where our balance sheet is at and the huge opportunity we have with the company that we built. That definitely is not something we will be doing this year.
So if that number was accurate, which is not, that kind of like, I need to edit my question on the fly here because I was going to ask, does it make it further acquisitions more difficult? But if you're looking to get the burn rate down to $1 million a month, does this open up the door for further acquisitions going into 2023?
It definitely does. You know, as I said, for us, there's just a huge opportunity to generate more profit. I hesitate to use the word revenue because sometimes people misconstrue that with, you know, losing money.
Yeah.
But the opportunity for us to generate more cash from the facilities that we've got is definitely our focus over the next bit. And we'll keep an eye on the market. There's opportunities out there. You know, in a bad market is where you find good opportunities to acquire things. But, you know, with what we've got, we really want to focus on that. The CCR business, which we don't talk too much about, is doing an exceptional job as well. And we want to be very, very prepared for MDMA this year. You know, we've always built the company with that very, very much top of mind. And so we want to be prepared for that and to make the most impactful entrance into that space when that drug's available.
One of our followers came up to me and we were concerned about possibly listing on the NASDAQ and doing a stock split. What's your response to that?
You know, we've always wanted to be on the NASDAQ. There's costs associated with that. Obviously, you know, consolidation considerations in regards to that. It's something that we're continuing to do the work on.
Yeah.
And we'll see what we need to do strategically and whether that makes sense. Obviously, you know, if the market continues to be challenging, which I don't think it will, you know, we'll just make sure that the timing is right. But we are, you know, majority of our business is in the United States now, and we do foresee us continuing to grow in the United States. So being on the NASDAQ makes a lot of sense. And for the institutional investors that are out there at the moment, which there are a lot of, you know, they want to see companies that are listed on the NASDAQ. So that's where we'll continue to aim towards. But again, we'll do so strategically that is, you know, the benefit of the company and shareholders.
So piggybacking off of that is the possibility of raising money. You're looking to get your costs down on a per month basis, but I have to ask the question, is raising money a possibility? And if so, concerns amongst the investor base about further dilution at these kinds of prices. Sure. Again, your response to that.
Yeah, we don't want to take on any unnecessary dilution. You know, if you ask me personally, our cap structure has always been one of the challenges. But with that, you know, we've raised a significant amount of money and we've built a company that we're extremely proud of. And we'll see what the market does. We don't need to raise money. You know, we just talked about the burn rate. We're probably one of the only psychedelic companies out there at the moment that doesn't need to race for the trough in the early part of next year. And I think that, you know, is going to be challenging. We want to continue to show, you know, and while the market's been challenging, I think the company has demonstrated quarter over quarter that we're doing an exceptional job of building something very substantial of substance that is going to be very, very attractive for investors when these other drugs come online as well. And we've seen that again, whether you're talking about MDMA, psilocybin, LSD, DMT, doesn't matter. All of these compounds have to go through a service provider. They have to go through a distribution network, and we've built the best distribution network that is scalable, sustainable, and effective.
You touched on how it's just capital market constraints in this industry. So if I'm understanding correctly, your existing footprint, you believe that your scale right now, do you feel, I guess, your scale to become a leader in psychedelic-assisted outpatient and clinical research organization services? You believe you have enough scale right now considering the capital markets constraint for the majority of this calendar year?
Yep. I think if we just stuck with what we had today, there's lots of opportunities for us to grow. There's tons of opportunities for us to expand the CCR business. And again, be ready to go for MDMA this year.
Okay. Well, one of the things I wanted to touch on as far as growth strategies, let's focus on California. There was a new decriminalization bill filed by Senator Scott Wiener in California. It was filed that brings the potential for better therapeutic options for mental health conditions using assisted therapy. So given certain limitations of the balance sheet, can you really pivot into California should conditions become favorable to expand your clinical footprint over there?
I think any of these, you know, whether you're talking about California, Oregon, Colorado, obviously, we're keeping a very, very close eye on all of those states, and I think that there's really exciting opportunities. But it's not going to be overnight necessarily. And for us, we really want to see. I think, to be honest, of all of the states that are going through some of these regulatory changes, Colorado is probably the most interesting. Oregon is interesting, but there's some limitations.
What would that present, Colorado? How would that work?
So Colorado, January 1st of 2024 they will be moving towards essentially, and again, this is all subject to change, but essentially it will be licensed facilities that can carry out psilocybin-assisted therapy.
Right.
And what they've said is if that goes well, after a couple of years, they're going to open it up for a whole bunch of other psychedelic compounds. That, for me, to be honest, if there's a way that insurance companies can provide financial support for those services, I think is a spectacular way for psychedelics to become more accessible for people. It allows for more unique business models, protocols. You're not overly constrained, and it opens up access in a way quicker and more effective way. So we'll see, but we're keeping a close eye on that. California, we're keeping a close eye on. But maybe back to your question around the balance sheet. There's lots of opportunities out there. I think we can also get to a place where we can grow organically as well. And I think we've built a platform that can do that. And one of the things that Novamind brought that has really been a huge learning opportunity for us is the way that they've grown and scaled within the state. And that's a playbook that we look to replicate, if and when the timing is right.
This is a lot different than cannabis as far as waiting for every single state to legalize. Do you eventually see only a handful of states, being, if somebody's in Florida battling problems, do you not see them traveling to certain states to get better? Like, how do you...
We have people that fly from Canada, where we have a universal healthcare system, so they get fully reimbursed. We have people that fly from Canada to Utah to go and get ketamine therapy.
Yeah.
Just because of the expertise there.
What's going to happen to some of these states if they're asking for people from help all across North America and for that matter, the world? They have the infrastructure to handle that?
I think the difference is, you mentioned cannabis, but you can't restrict care. You can't. It's an unethical thing to restrict care, especially for something that is clinically proven to be effective, right?
Yeah.
And frankly, I think from a business standpoint, think about if you've got, say you're a corporate client, right? And we have a corporate client right now who pays for all of their employees to get ketamine assisted therapy once a year, right? If you're a corporate client who, as a part of their reimbursement strategy or their healthcare reimbursement strategy, psychedelic therapy is a part of that. They want what's most effective for their employees, and their employees want the most effective thing that's for them. So the amount of pressure that states are going to be on to make sure that this is across the country is going to be massive. And I think the decriminalization movement, these regulatory changes, I think that's what is really creating the amount of change that's happening, and it's happening fast. I mean, this is all happening within the last couple of years.
I'm having so many conversations right now with people. You cover the healthcare industry. Would you? Is there companies that you'd like to discuss and look at? Absolutely. I see a huge, as much as the markets and the economy right now is struggling, healthcare, as you can see, and you've talked about this even a year and a half, 2 years ago in the heart of COVID, and now that we're getting post that, you're really starting to see, and I've discussed this before, the ramifications of it all outside of COVID.
Yeah.
And it's really exposed where we are, not only within our country, but globally.
Yeah. Have a conversation with anybody anywhere, and if mental health doesn't come up sometime in the conversation, it's rampant. And unfortunately, and we've just seen the numbers, but again, whether you're talking about addiction, suicide, depression, anxiety, all of these numbers continue to go up. Yeah. And COVID has greatly exacerbated that, and we don't have good solutions. And the amount of pressure that regulators, healthcare organizations everywhere, the amount of pressure that everybody is under at the moment to try and get people more support for mental health challenges is huge.
Look where we are in society. I go to the local butcher shop and shoot the shit with somebody who's around my age, and the response is, "I'm just glad I grew up in an era back in the day." And it's like, what is that? What's that show about where we are today? Right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Last question, it's an important one, and it comes down to just the return on the investment. So investors, as you know, in the psychedelic space, not very happy with their portfolios. Some of the people that reached out to us recently, $50, $100, $500,000, they're down.
Yep.
And this is true whether you're invested in drug development stocks or assisted therapy facilitators like your model. So we've talked in the past on the opportunity the industry presents itself pertaining to MDMA and psilocybin. As you discussed, we're talking about potentially the end of 2023. So between now and that timeline, what is your message to investors who are losing money and also are losing long-term focus on the sector? What do you say to them?
You know, I just had this conversation with our team, and again, going off of the conversation we've had, and I think timing wise, you know, just to talk about the market for a second, it's been challenging across the board. Doesn't matter where you look, it's bad everywhere. I think one of the things, frankly, even through December, that a lot of people forgot is that tax loss selling and tax loss season can be painful. We haven't had a proper tax loss season in a couple of years.
Yeah.
And this year was the last tax loss day of the year was yesterday. And today, all of a sudden, things are moving back in the right direction again. So you've seen an absolutely brutal tax loss season. Doesn't matter where you get your news from. It's very doom and gloom out there at the moment, which is usually the best time to start looking for things to buy if you can afford it. But I think, you know, again, to our conversation, and if I look at this from a very binary standpoint, is you've got, I think we would probably agree the largest societal issue out there at the moment is mental health care. You've got, again, I hate to use the term market, but a massive growing addressable need out there and no significant innovation in 50 years.
Yeah.
You've never seen, like, from an opportunity standpoint, you've never seen a bigger opportunity to, you know, I'll say change the world, but frankly, you know, help a massive amount of people.
Yeah.
And just to bring it down to psychedelics is you've got an industry that has, in a very, very short period of time, captured a ton of resources and gone through a huge consolidation phase. And through that, you've been able to figure out, you know, who is taking those resources and build something that is here to last and be able to take advantage of this, you know, now, you know, as we've talked about with MDMA, psilocybin not far behind it, now the change is happening and access is opening up. Who's taken those resources and built something that is going to, you know, be able to take advantage of that opportunity. And I think, you know, we've done an exceptional job of that. I think from a service provider standpoint, we're in a class of our own, and we don't have the kind of burn rate that, or not only burn rate, but time horizon that a lot of the drug developers do. And I think that work is extremely important, but that's a multi-$100 million investment, long-term kind of process. And you've got MAPS, who's done it nonprofit, and is now, you know, on the kind of 5-yard line. And you've got psilocybin regulation going this kind of unique model, and the opportunity for just ketamine and mental health services continues to grow month over month. And so from an investor standpoint, I deeply, I'm with you fully in regards to how painful it's been. You know, I bought some more stock this week. I was waiting for tax loss season to find a bottom, and I think that it has. And I think going into the new year, I think as a company, you know, did we spend some money? Yes, we spent some money, but we put together a platform that we can greatly expand upon, that is, you know, continues to demonstrate success quarter over quarter. And as we move towards, again, MDMA and all these drugs now, you know, becoming available, we're ready and extremely excited about it.
True or false? MDMA is legalized Q1 2024.
As a personal opinion, I think so. I think so. Yeah.
Bold predictions for the psychedelic industry of 2023. What would they be?
I think from the conversations that I've said this before, but there's a lot of sophisticated capital out there at the moment that is very, very interested in this space. And, we've seen this on a micro level in regards to our clinics and how busy they are, the amount of inbound we get for people wondering when they can do MDMA therapy, wondering when they can do psilocybin therapy. I think, notwithstanding, the headwinds that I think we're still going to make our way through in regards to what happens with interest rates and all that kind of stuff. But I think there's been no sector that has been worsely beat up than the healthcare sector over the last couple of years. There's no question.
Agreed.
So, for people who watch the markets,
Usually
it makes no sense. It makes no sense that we've just gone through a massive healthcare crisis.
It shows where our priorities are.
Right. Well, but also it shows where the opportunity is. And typically when things are beat up, whatever's beat up the most usually has the biggest turnaround. And I think we're there. I think we're there. I think.
Let me ask you something. What was your title at Canaccord?
At Canaccord, I was an investment advisor at Canaccord, and then when I left that side of the business, I was running. I was head of sales at Mackey Research, running their Vancouver office, and I was a director of the Across Canada company.
So when you combine that with what you're doing now, I'd like to maybe get an idea, like market trends, as to what we can look for. Like markets are let's face it, volatile right now. As you said, interest rates that could be implemented, and we'll see the same old probably for the next 3-6 months potentially. Like 2 years ago, we saw SPAC deals left, right, and center. What happens with that space? Do we see a resurgence when it comes to that? Like, did you maybe explain to us a little bit as to like maybe some of those SPAC deals, what they meant a couple years ago, and could they come into play come this year?
I mean, I think the SPAC deals, represented kind of a peak, for sure, a kind of peak in the market where people were putting essentially a shell company together and raising, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
I think where the SPAC market is at the moment is very interesting.
Why is that?
Well, if you look at when those SPACs got put together about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, most of those of the SPACs that are out there, I think 50 or 60% of them all expire within the next 8 months. So you've got a huge amount of capital that is, if it doesn't go somewhere, all of that money gets returned to investors, and that's not what the SPACs, that's not with the advisors, that's not what everybody who's put those SPAC deals together in the first place. That's not what they wanted, or that's not what's best for them. So they're looking for companies out there at the moment that I think are revenue generating. Most of those SPACs were earmarked for, tech companies with pie in the sky, kind of valuations, and most of those deals fell apart. And I think most of those SPACs are looking for a place where, where can they put a certain amount of capital that is going to, bring to profitability, revenue generation, and the best opportunity for shareholders. So
I think healthcare is at the forefront for that if they're in buying mode?
I think so. I think healthcare is a big part of that. I think there's probably a couple industries that could definitely benefit from it, but I think healthcare, things that are revenue generating, sustainable, but also have big blue sky opportunities, which I don't think that there's anything better than mental health care. That's where I could see some of those and some of those opportunities come. And I think more so that's probably where I could see a lot of the market focusing over the last while. I think where, the psychedelic space has gone through quite an education process over the last couple of years, from just the general investor trying to understand, what does this all mean at the end of the day? What does the product look like? What does the service look like? I think that clarity is there now, or at least hopefully so. I think there's probably more work to do, but I think this year it will continue to become abundantly clear, who's making money and what are the models that need to exist or be created in order to scale psychedelic therapy to meet the massive demand that's out there.
That's an interesting educational piece. but buying mode, we could see some of that stuff. I know you probably can't share, but I asked the question, have you fielded calls? But are there companies out there that are interested, have you heard, in this space? Or not companies, but certain people with regards to these deals that are looking at the psychedelic space?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Listen, Happy New Year. Looking good. You know, still got some sun from being away, but hard at work. And I know there's a lot of stuff that you guys plan to tackle. But I hope, obviously, for our investors, your investors, and a lot of our viewers got some good feedback and dialogue from this podcast today. Again, if you guys are watching this, feel free to leave a comment below. If there's any more questions that you want us to ask Payton, leave a comment below. We'll make sure to have these ongoing conversations and get the information that you want. Great chatting with you. Great connecting with you. And happy holidays, and let's reconnect in the new year.
Sounds good, buddy. Happy holidays.
All right. Thanks. Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. 2023 is here, and right now, a lot of uncertainty pertaining to the markets, especially new emerging industries like crypto, cannabis, psychedelics, and more. So leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview. What are the questions that you want asked? And most importantly, what's the information that you want to learn? Once we produce these videos, then share this to your network, subscribe to our channel, and click on that bell for all notifications, because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.